Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Oliver Royce stood at the back of the reception hall, nursing his third scotch of the evening. The ice in his glass had melted, watering down the expensive liquor he'd paid for. Just like everything else at this wedding, $40,000. The number repeated in his head like a drumbeat as he watched Tessa Morgan twirl in her designer wedding dress on the dance floor. His sister-in-law's face glowed with the manufactured joy of someone who measured happiness in thread counts and brand names. Calvin sidled up next to him, work-rough hands wrapped around a beer bottle. Man, this is some shindig. Tell me again why you're footing the bill for Princess Tessa's fairy tale. Oliver didn't answer immediately. His eyes tracked Margaret across the room as she networked with Dallas society, her back straight, smile perfectly calibrated. She hadn't looked his way in over an hour. Family, Oliver finally said, the word tasting bitter. Calvin snorted. Family don't drain your savings account. Not real family. Drop it. Oliver's voice hardened just enough to make Calvin raise his hands and surrender. Your money, your choice. Calvin took a long pull from his beer. Just saying, my garage could have used that investment. We could have built something real together. The wedding band transitioned to another overpriced love song as Oliver watched Harlan Morgan stumble toward them, drink sloshing over the rim of his glass. His father-in-law's face was flushed, eyes glassy. Oliver, the man of the hour. Harlan clapped him on the shoulder, alcohol fumes wafting between them. Still can't believe you pulled this off. Didn't think you had it in you. Just wanted Tessa to have a nice day. Oliver said evenly. Harlan leaned in closer. That's the difference between you and me, son. I understand value. This, he gestured broadly at the opulent ballroom, is just window dressing. But the connections? Priceless. Course, you wouldn't understand that, coming from... He waved his hand vaguely, searching for words. From where? Oliver asked, his voice quiet. You know, Harlan continued, oblivious to the danger. Your background. Good with your hands, though. Gotta give you that. He slapped Oliver's shoulder again. Useful skill. Calvin stepped forward, but Oliver placed a restraining hand on his friend's arm. Enjoy the party, Harlan, Oliver said. You should join your wife. She's looking for you. After Harlan staggered away, Calvin shook his head. How do you stand these people? Oliver's eyes found Margaret again. She was laughing with Tessa now, their heads close together. I watch. I listen. I remember. Across the room, Tessa broke away from her sister and glided toward Oliver, her smile widening. She reached for his arm, fingers lingering longer than necessary. Dance with me, she demanded, tugging him toward the floor. Margaret's too busy playing social butterfly to appreciate you. Before Oliver could refuse, she pulled him into the crowd. Tessa pressed against him, her perfume overwhelming. Thank you for all this, she whispered, her lips brushing his ear. If I'd known you were this generous, I might have gone after you instead of my sister. Oliver kept his face neutral, hands properly positioned as they moved across the floor. You're family now. That's what matters. Tessa's laugh was brittle. Family? Is that what we are? Her eyes darted to where Margaret stood watching them, her expression unreadable. You really don't see it, do you? See what? Nothing. Tessa smiled, all teeth. Nothing at all. As the song ended, Oliver stepped back, but Tessa held his hand a moment too long. From the corner of his eye, he saw Margaret turn away. Oliver retreated to the bar, where he found Delia Morgan perched on a stool, looking exhausted behind her careful makeup. Beautiful wedding, he offered. His mother-in-law startled slightly, as if surprised to be addressed. Yes, very extravagant. Her fingers worried at the pearl necklace around her throat. Margaret says you paid for everything. It's fine. Delia studied him, something like pity in her eyes. You're a good man, Oliver. Better than. She stopped herself, glancing toward her husband and daughters. Just better than most. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of champagne toasts and forced smiles. Oliver stood in the shadows, watching the Morgan family shine in the spotlight he'd purchased. Not once did any of them thank him publicly. Not even Margaret. As the last guest departed, Oliver collected Margaret's wrap and purse. She was busy saying goodbye to Tessa and her new husband. Both couples posed perfectly for the departing photographer. Calvin found him again as he waited. Need a ride home? Margaret drove separately. Said she needed her own car for some reason. Calvin's eyes narrowed. Something's off, man. You feel it. Oliver nodded slightly. Go home. I'll call you tomorrow. The drive back to their suburban home was silent. Margaret spent it texting, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her phone screen. Oliver didn't ask who she was messaging at 2 a.m. Some questions had answers you didn't want to hear. Oliver unlocked the front door and stepped into the dark house, Margaret trailing behind him. I'm exhausted, she announced, moving past him toward the stairs. Oliver loosened his tie. I'll be up in a minute. In the kitchen, he poured himself a glass of water, rolling his shoulders to release the tension that had built over the long day. Upstairs, he heard Margaret moving around, drawers opening and closing. When he finally climbed the stairs and pushed open the bedroom door, he stopped cold. The room was half empty. Margaret's closet stood open, revealing bare hangers. The dresser drawers on her side gaped open, emptied. Her vanity was cleared of makeup and perfume bottles. It looked like she'd been methodically removing her things for days. Margaret? He called. Turning toward the hallway, he found her in the kitchen, leaning against the counter. She'd changed from her bridesmaid dress into jeans and a blouse he didn't recognize. Your job is done, she said flatly. Oliver stared at her, trying to make sense of the words. What? Margaret's hand moved to a wine glass beside her. You heard me. Your job is done. In one fluid motion, she hurled the glass. It shattered against the wall inches from his head, red wine dripping down the white paint like blood. Get out. Oliver didn't flinch. This is my house. Margaret laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Is it? Check the deed, Oliver. Check the accounts. What have you done? Nothing you can prove. She folded her arms. Leave now, or I call the police. I've got witnesses who saw how you grabbed me at the wedding. How you've been controlling, abusive. Witnesses? Realization dawned slowly. Tessa. Margaret's smile was cold. Among others. My father will back me up. You know how convincing he can be. Oliver stood motionless, piecing together the signs he'd ignored for months. The separate accounts. The whispered phone calls. Tessa's strange behavior. Why? He asked finally. Because you served your purpose. Margaret glanced at her watch. You have 10 minutes to pack a bag and go. After that, I'm calling 911. Oliver didn't argue. He climbed the stairs, grabbed a duffel bag, and filled it with essentials. As he worked, his mind clicked through options, scenarios, next steps. The numbness would wear off soon enough. When it did, he'd need a plan. Downstairs, Margaret waited by the door, phone in hand, timer visibly counting down. The rest of your things will be on the porch tomorrow between noon and 2. Don't come back after that. She opened the door. And Oliver, don't think about fighting this. You won't win. Oliver walked to his truck without looking back. He started the engine and drove 3 blocks before pulling over, his hands suddenly shaking too hard to grip the wheel. He called Calvin. Hey man, what's up? Calvin's voice was thick with sleep. I need a place to crash. A pause. Everything okay? No. 20 minutes later, Oliver parked behind Calvin's garage. His friend waited in the doorway, confusion and concern etched on his face. What happened? Oliver grabbed his duffel bag and brushed past him. She threw me out, said I'd serve my purpose. Calvin swore under his breath. After you just dropped 40 grand on her sister's wedding? Looks like that was the point. Oliver sank onto the worn couch in the garage's back office. I think they planned this. All of them. The whole family. Calvin sat across from him. That's some cold-blooded shit. Oliver stared at the wall. I should have seen it coming. How? You trusted your wife, man. That's what you're supposed to do. Trust is for people who can afford to lose. Oliver's voice hardened. I won't make that mistake again. Calvin disappeared and returned with a bottle and 2 glasses. He poured them each 2 fingers of whiskey. What are you going to do now? He asked, handing Oliver a glass. Oliver drained his in one swallow, the burn bringing him back to himself. First I sleep. Then I figure out exactly what she's done. His eyes met Calvin's. And then I make sure she regrets it. A week later, Oliver sat in Calvin's office reviewing the divorce papers Margaret had served him. The legal language was dense, but the message was clear. She wanted everything. Emotional abandonment. Calvin read over his shoulder. Financial control? What the hell? Oliver set the papers down. She's playing a game, setting up a story. For what? To justify taking everything. Oliver had spent the week investigating his finances. Margaret had systematically emptied their joint accounts over the past 3 months. The house they bought together had been refinanced without his knowledge, his signature forged on documents he'd never seen. How'd she pull that off? Calvin asked when Oliver explained. Harlan has friends at the bank. Oliver's voice was grim, and I trusted her to handle the bills while I worked 60-hour weeks. Oliver's phone buzzed on the desk. An unfamiliar number. Hello, Oliver. A frantic female voice. It's Delia. Delia Morgan. He straightened. Mrs. Morgan. I didn't know who else to call. Her voice broke. It's gone. Everything's gone. What's gone? Our retirement accounts. Harlan's investments. She was crying now. Margaret emptied them. Tessa helped her. They transferred everything, and now they're both gone. Oliver caught Calvin's questioning look and mouthed Margaret's mother. When did this happen? He asked. 3 days ago. Harlan just found out this morning. He thought. Delia's voice dropped to a whisper. He thought he was part of whatever they were planning, but they left him out too. They tricked him just like they tricked you. The final piece clicked into place. Where are they now? We don't know. They're not answering calls. Tessa's husband is looking for her too. Oliver leaned back in his chair, a new clarity washing over him. Mrs. Morgan, I need you to tell me exactly what happened from the beginning. As Delia poured out the story how Margaret and Tessa had convinced their parents to consolidate their assets for a family investment opportunity, Oliver felt something he hadn't experienced in days. The beginning of a smile. When he hung up, Calvin studied his face. What's got you looking like that? They made a mistake, Oliver said. They got greedy. So now it's not just me they've screwed over. Oliver stood, energy humming through him. Now we've got leverage. Calvin leaned forward. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I need to make a call. Oliver scrolled through his contacts, stopping on a name he hadn't dialed in years, Celine Hart. Your ex? Calvin asked, recognizing the name. The lawyer? Oliver nodded. Margaret and Tessa think they're smart. Let's see how they handle someone who's smarter. The phone rang 3 times before a crisp voice answered. Hart speaking. Celine. It's Oliver Royce. A long pause. Well, this is unexpected. I need your help. Professional or personal? Both. Another pause. You've got 15 minutes. My office. Don't be late. Oliver grabbed his keys. For the first time since the wedding, his mind was clear. Margaret had declared war, but she'd forgotten something important. He never lost a fight when he saw it coming. Celine Hart's office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, all gleaming glass and polished steel. Oliver sat in a leather chair across from her desk, watching as she reviewed the divorce papers. Her dark hair was shorter than he remembered, cut in a severe bob that emphasized her sharp cheekbones. She hadn't changed much else in the 8 years since they dated, still all precision and focus. This is aggressive, she said finally, setting the papers down. She's painting you as an abuser, a controller. Says here you isolated her from her family. Celine's mouth twisted. Interesting, given you just funded her sister's wedding. Margaret's building a narrative, Oliver replied. She and Tessa emptied their parents' retirement accounts 3 days ago, then disappeared. Celine raised an eyebrow. And why should I care about any of this? We didn't exactly part on the best terms. Because you're the best family law attorney in Dallas. Because you specialize in asset recovery. Oliver leaned forward. And because you hate losing even more than you might dislike me. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. You always were observant. Margaret thinks she's won already. That I'll roll over, take the hit. And you won't. No. Oliver's voice hardened. I won't. Celine tapped a manicured nail against the desk. What exactly did she take? Our savings. Home equity through a fraudulent refinance. And apparently her parents' retirement funds. Approximately how much are we talking? From me? Close to $120,000, not counting the house. From her parents, At least $200,000 more. Celine whistled softly. That's not small change, and definitely not something you can hide easily. She studied him. What do you want, Oliver? Quick divorce? Maximum recovery? Scorched earth. I want it's mine, he said, and I want them to pay for what they did. Revenge isn't a legal strategy. Then make it one. Celine held his gaze, then nodded slowly. I'll need a retainer. 10,000. I can get you 5 now. The rest, next week. Where are you getting money if she cleaned you out? I've got resources she doesn't know about. Oliver had always kept a separate emergency account, a lesson from growing up poor. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to start. Fine. Celine opened her laptop. Let's begin with a strategy. First, we file a counterclaim alleging fraud, forgery, and theft. We request an immediate freeze on all accounts associated with Margaret or Tessa Morgan. Will that work? Probably not, if they've already moved the money. But it creates a paper trail and puts the court on notice. Her fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard. Next, we need evidence. Bank records, forged documents, witnesses. How do we get those? Leave that to me. I've got contacts at most of the banks in town. Celine's smile was cold, and a particular talent for depositions that make people nervous. Oliver watched her work, the familiar intensity bringing back memories of why they connected in the first place and why it hadn't lasted. Celine operated at one speed, relentless. What about her parents? He asked. Delia called me, but Harlan's pride won't let him admit he got played. Then we use that. Celine looked up. If Margaret and Tessa stole from their parents, that's not just a civil matter. That's criminal fraud. We get Delia to file a police report. She won't go against Harlan. She already did by calling you. Celine tapped her pen against the desk. Give me your number. I'll handle it. For the next 2 hours, they crafted a multi-pronged strategy. Legal filings to stall Margaret's divorce proceedings. Financial traces to track the missing money. Subpoenas for bank records. And careful documentation of the wedding expenses, proof that Oliver had been manipulated into one final, massive expenditure before being discarded. We're missing something, Celine said eventually, rubbing her temples. The timing. Why now? Why not drain your accounts months ago? Oliver considered this. The wedding was important to them. Appearances matter. More than money. To the Morgans? Yes. He thought about Tessa's elaborate celebration. The social connections Harlan had emphasized. They needed me to fund the wedding so they'd look good for their social circle. So image is their weakness. Celine made a note. That's useful. As Oliver stood to leave, Celine walked him to the door. Why did you really call me? She asked. There are other attorneys. Because you knew me before Margaret. You know I'm not what she's claiming. Celine's expression softened slightly. I know you're stubborn, meticulous, and occasionally frustrating. But abusive? Controlling? She shook her head. Not the Oliver Royce I knew. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This gets ugly from here. She handed him a business card. Call Calvin. Tell him I need his help with surveillance at Harlan's house. Oliver raised an eyebrow. What? Celine shrugged. I kept tabs on you. Calvin's the only friend who stuck around after you married into the Morgan circus. For the first time in days, Oliver felt something like hope. Margaret thought she'd stripped him of everything. She didn't realize she'd only freed him to fight back 3 weeks into their counteroffensive. Oliver sat in Celine's conference room, surrounded by documents. Bank statements, credit reports, property records. The paper trail of his marriage laid bare. Calvin paced by the window, too restless to sit. This is insane. How'd she hide all this from you? Separate accounts, Oliver said. Separate computers. And I worked 70 hours a week while she handled our finances. Celine entered, carrying a stack of folders. Her expression made Oliver straighten. We found it, she announced, dropping the folders on the table. The Cayman account. Oliver leaned forward. You're sure? Positive. Celine pulled out a document. Margaret opened it 18 months ago. Initial deposit of $30,000 from your joint savings. Since then, she's been siphoning funds through a complicated chain of transfers. Calvin whistled. That's Emotion's 11-level scheming. Celine nodded. It gets better. Guess who helped set it up? Tessa's former employer. That investment firm she worked at before quitting to focus on wedding planning. Can we touch the account? Oliver asked. Not directly, but we can freeze it through international banking treaties since the funds were obtained fraudulently. Celine pulled out another document. And here's the cherry on top. We found a loan application in your name from 6 months ago. $40,000. Signatures clearly forged. Oliver recognized the amount immediately. The wedding. Exactly. Tessa took out a fraudulent loan using your credit. They used that money for the wedding, not your savings. So, where did my $40,000 go? Celine smiled grimly. Straight to the Caymans. Calvin slammed a hand on the table. They played you, man. This whole time. How long? Oliver's voice was quiet. How long was she planning this? Celine hesitated. Based on the account activity, at least 2 years. 2 years. Half their marriage. Oliver absorbed the blow silently. There's more, Celine continued. We tracked the wedding vendors. Half of them don't exist. They're shell companies that redirect to accounts controlled by Tessa. So the wedding was overcharged on purpose. By about 60%. Celine laid out more papers. Flowers that should have cost $5,000 were billed at $8,000. Catering inflated by $12,000. Even the venue was marked up. Calvin swore under his breath. Whole thing was a scam. A well-executed one, Celine agreed. Until they got greedy with Harlan and Delia's money. Oliver stood and walked to the window. Dallas sprawled below, oblivious to the quiet rage building inside him. What else have they been hiding? He asked without turning around. We're still digging. Celine shuffled papers. But your surveillance idea paid off. Calvin pulled out his phone. I installed cameras at Harlan's place like you asked. Caught something interesting yesterday. He pulled up a video and handed the phone to Oliver. On screen, Harlan paced his study, phone to his ear. Yes, I understand the piece isn't authentic, Harlan was saying, his voice tinny through the phone speaker. But your buyer doesn't know that, does he? The provenance documents look legitimate enough. Oliver handed the phone back. He's selling fake antiques. Trying to, Calvin confirmed. Looks like Daddy Morgan is desperate for cash now that his daughter's drained his accounts. Celine made a note. We'll add that to the file. Anything we can use to pressure him could be valuable. What's our next move? Oliver asked. We've built the case. Celine gathered the documents. Now we start applying pressure. Strategically. How? First, we leak selected information to a contact I have at the Dallas Morning News. Nothing about the Caymans, yet we save that for court. But enough to start rumors about the wedding vendors and missing money. The Morgans care about appearances, Oliver remembered. Exactly. We hit them where it hurts, first their reputation. Celine, check her watch. Meanwhile, I'm deposing Margaret's former assistant tomorrow. Woman named Claudia who apparently has some interesting text messages saved. Calvin's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked up sharply. Got a hit on the facial recognition alert you set up, he told Celine. Margaret just used her credit card at a hotel in Oklahoma City. Send me the details, Celine ordered, already reaching for her phone. I'll have our investigator there within 2 hours. Oliver watched them work, a strange calm settling over him. Margaret had dismantled his life methodically, believing he'd never recover. She hadn't counted on his ability to rebuild, to adapt to Tio's strike back. Oliver. Celine's voice pulled him from his thoughts. We need to discuss what happens after we win. What do you want from all this? He considered the question carefully. Justice. My money back. And for them to understand what they took from me. Revenge, Calvin translated. Accountability, Oliver corrected. I want them to face consequences. Real ones. Celine nodded. Then we keep pushing. On all fronts. As they left the conference room, Celine touched Oliver's arm. I need you to prepare yourself. This gets public now. Ugly. I'm ready. Are you? Because they'll say terrible things about you. Margaret's already spreading rumors. Oliver met her gaze steadily. Let them talk. I know the truth. The truth doesn't always win. It does when you have evidence, he replied. And we have plenty of that. The Dallas Tribune headline glared from newsstands across the city. Wedding of deception. Prominent family accused of fraud. Below it, a photo from Tessa's wedding, the Morgan family smiling. unaware their carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. Oliver read the article in Calvin's garage, expression unchanging as the reporter detailed allegations of vendor fraud, misappropriated funds, and family betrayal. Celine had been strategic with what she leaked enough to create scandal without revealing their full hand. The phone rang. Calvin answered, then held it out to Oliver. Delia Morgan. Oliver took the phone. Mrs. Morgan, have you seen it? Her voice trembled. The newspaper. I have. It's all true, isn't it? What they're saying about Margaret and Tessa. Yes. A shaky inhale. Harlan's beside himself. His friends are calling, asking questions. The club's talking about revoking his membership. Oliver felt no sympathy. Where are Margaret and Tessa now? Tessa came home last night. Her husband's filed for annulment. She's locked herself in their guest house. Delia paused. Margaret's still missing. But she called Harlan yesterday, asking for money. Did he get it to her? He couldn't if he wanted to. Our accounts are frozen, your lawyer's doing, I assume. Celine is thorough. Delia's voice dropped. What do you want, Oliver? To destroy us completely. I want what's mine, Mrs. Morgan. And I want the truth acknowledged. And if we give you that, what then? Then it ends. For you and Harlan, at least. A long silence. What do you need from me? 2 hours later, Oliver and Celine sat across from Delia in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of Dallas. The older woman looked haggard, her carefully maintained appearance beginning to crack. Start from the beginning, Celine instructed gently. When did you first notice money missing? Delia twisted her wedding ring. 3 months ago. I check our accounts regularly, Harlan doesn't. I noticed withdrawals I couldn't explain. When I asked him, he said he'd moved some funds for a business opportunity with the girls. But that wasn't true. No, at least not entirely. Delia looked down. Margaret and Tessa had convinced him they needed seed money for an investment. Something exclusive, but they needed it quickly and quietly. So he gave him access to the accounts. Oliver concluded. Delia nodded miserably. Harlan thought he was in on it, that they'd triple his investment within months. When did you realize it was a con? Celine asked, when everything disappeared at once. Delia's eyes filled with tears. They didn't just take the investment money. They cleaned us out completely. Even Harlan couldn't deny it then. Celine pushed a document across the table. Mrs. Morgan, this is a sworn affidavit describing what you've told us. We need you to sign it. Delia stared at the paper. If I do this, Harlan will never forgive me. He's not the victim here, Oliver said quietly. You are, and so am I. He's my husband, and Margaret is your daughter. Yet here we are. Delia flinched. You don't understand family loyalty. I understand honesty, Oliver countered, and consequences. Celine intervened smoothly. Mrs. Morgan, we can compel your testimony if necessary, but it would be better for everyone if you cooperated voluntarily. Delia's hand shook as she reached for the pen. What happens after I sign? We file criminal charges against Margaret and Tessa, Celine explained. Fraud, theft, forgery. With your testimony, conviction is likely. Prison, Delia paled. Possibly, Celine acknowledged. Though first offenders often get probation and restitution orders. Delia signed the document, then pushed it away as if it burned her fingers. Margaret always said you were cold, Oliver. Calculating. She looked up at him. I should have recognized she was describing herself. After Delia left, Celine collected the affidavit. That was easier than expected. She's scared, Oliver said, of facing retirement with nothing, of Harlan's anger when he realizes she's turned on their daughters. Speaking of anger, Celine checked her phone. Our investigators found Margaret. She's holed up in an Airbnb outside Oklahoma City. Alone. Looks like it. And she's running low on funds. Her last few card transactions were declined. Oliver nodded. Let her stew for another day. Then make sure the local news finds her. Already arranged. Reporter scheduled to stumble across her tomorrow morning. That evening, Oliver watched the footage from a Dallas News crew ambushing Tessa as she tried to sneak into her parents' house. The once poised woman looked disheveled, wild-eyed. Is it true you stole from your own parents? The reporter demanded. Microphone thrust forward. No comment. Tessa tried to shield her face. What about the fraudulent loan in your brother-in-law's name? Did you forge his signature? Tessa froze, panic flashing across her face before she bolted for the door. The next morning brought footage from Oklahoma Margaret spotted leaving her rental, surrounded by cameras. She dyed her hair dark, wore sunglasses even in the dim morning light. Margaret Morgan, did you empty your parents' retirement accounts? Where's the money, Mrs. Royce? Are the allegations of fraud true? Margaret shoved a cameraman, nearly tripping in her haste to reach her car. The footage caught her license plate, clearly evidence of her location, now public record, BY afternoon. Delia Morgan was trending on social media after giving a tearful interview confirming the allegations against her daughters. They took everything, she said, voice breaking. Our savings, our security, even their own sister-in-law's money. Oliver trusted Margaret, and she betrayed him completely. Oliver watched it all unfold from Calvin's garage, a strange detachment settling over him. The Morgans had built their lives on appearance and social standing. Now, they were the talk of Dallas for all the wrong reasons. You okay with this? Calvin asked, watching the coverage with him. It's getting ugly out there. It was always ugly, Oliver replied. The difference is now everyone can see it. His phone buzzed with a text from Celine, court date set. 2 weeks. Margaret's lawyer requesting settlement talks. Oliver typed back, no deals, thus Celine's response came quickly. Didn't think so. Prepare yourself for Thursday. Deposition day. Calvin read the exchange over his shoulder. You ready to face her? Oliver pocketed his phone. I've been ready since the night she threw me out. The machine they'd set in motion was working perfectly. The Morgan family's carefully constructed image was crumbling, their social connections evaporating as quickly as their finances. And Margaret, who believed herself so clever, was running out of places to hide. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. The deposition room felt too small for the tension it contained. Oliver sat on one side of the long table, Celine beside him. Across from them, Margaret perched stiffly next to her attorney, a nervous-looking man named Peterson. Margaret had abandoned the dark hair dye, returning to her natural blonde, though the roots showed neglect. Her tailored outfit couldn't disguise the strain of recent weeks, the shadows under her eyes, the tightness around her mouth. She hadn't looked directly at Oliver since entering. For the record, Celine began, voice cool and professional. Please state your name. Margaret Morgan Royce. And you understand you're under oath today? Margaret nodded. Verbal response, please, the court reporter reminded her. Yes, I understand. Celine arranged documents in front of her. Mrs. Morgan Royce, when did you open your account? At First Caribbean Bank in Grand Cayman. Margaret flinched visibly. Peterson leaned over to whisper something, but she waved him off. I don't have such an account. Celine slid a document across the table. This banking record indicates otherwise. Account opened 18 months ago. Initial deposit $30,000. Your signature on the paperwork. I want to assert my Fifth Amendment right, Margaret said quickly. This isn't a criminal proceeding yet, Celine replied. You can refuse to answer, but the court will be informed of that refusal. Peterson intervened. My client isn't obligated to discuss accounts that aren't marital property. Interesting argument, Celine smiled thinly. Since the initial deposit came directly from the Royces' joint savings account. For 4 grueling hours, Celine methodically dismantled Margaret's claims. The emotional abandonment narrative collapsed under evidence of couples' therapy sessions Oliver had arranged and Margaret had skipped. The financial control allegations fell apart against documentation of Margaret's exclusive management of their accounts. Throughout it all, Oliver remained silent, watching Margaret's composure crack piece by piece. Let's discuss the refinancing of the home at 1842 Westlake Drive, Celine continued. Documents show your husband's signature, but Mr. Royce testifies he never signed these papers. He must have forgotten, Margaret insisted. Oliver works so much. He signs whatever I put in front of him. So you're claiming this is his authentic signature? Of course. Celine produced another document. This is the report from our handwriting expert. It conclusively demonstrates forgery. She slid another paper forward. And this is the security footage from Landmark Bank showing your sister, Tessa, entering the bank with these documents on the date they were notarized. Margaret's face drained of color. I want to speak to my attorney privately. We'll take a short recess. Celine agreed pleasantly. In the hallway. Oliver leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. You're doing great, Celine told him. She's falling apart in there. She still hasn't looked at me. She can't. Looking at you means facing what she did. When they returned, Margaret's attorney requested another break to discuss settlement options. No, Oliver said, the first word he'd spoken all day that Margaret's head snapped up, finally meeting his gaze. What he saw, there wasn't remorse, it was calculation. Even now, she was looking for an angle, an escape. We're not interested in settling, Celine clarified. We'll continue the deposition. Peterson tried again. My client is willing to make significant concessions. Too late. Oliver cut him off. Margaret leaned forward. Oliver, be reasonable. We can end this quietly. Quietly, he repeated. Like you ended our marriage? By emptying our accounts and throwing me out with 10 minutes notice? I was upset. You were methodical, he corrected. Planning for years. Moving money. Setting me up. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Margaret's face. What do you want? The truth. On record. Now. Celine slid a recorder forward. Mrs. Morgan Royce, did you fraudulently transfer funds from joint accounts without your husband's knowledge or consent? Margaret glanced at her lawyer, who nodded resignedly. Yes, she admitted. Did you forge your husband's signature on loan applications and refinancing documents? Tessa did the actual signing, but did you falsely claim your husband was emotionally and financially abusive to justify your actions? A longer pause. Yes. And did you and your sister deliberately inflate wedding costs and create fake vendor accounts to funnel additional money away from your husband? Yes. Celine stopped the recorder. Thank you for your honesty. We'll be amending our court filings to include these admissions. As they gathered their materials, Margaret reached for Oliver's arm. Wait. He stilled. I never meant it to go this far, she said, voice low. It wasn't personal. Oliver looked at her hand until she withdrew it. That's what makes it worse, Margaret. To you, destroying someone's life wasn't even personal. 2 weeks later, they faced each other again in family court. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and little patience, reviewed the case files with evident disgust. In light of the evidence presented, she announced, I'm dismissing all claims by Mrs. Morgan Royce. Further, I'm ordering full financial restitution of all misappropriated funds, plus interest. Margaret's attorney began to object, but the judge cut him off. Mr. Peterson, your client has admitted to fraud, forgery, and perjury. She's fortunate we're in family court, or she'd be facing criminal charges. The judge fixed Margaret with a stern glare. As it stands, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for potential prosecution. Oliver sat motionless, Celine beside him, as the judge continued reading her decision. The house would be sold, the proceeds divided after Oliver's initial investment was returned. Margaret's separate accounts, including the Cayman funds, would be subject to discovery and division. Finally, the judge concluded, given the extreme nature of the financial misconduct, I'm awarding punitive damages of $25,000 to Mr. Royce, to be paid from Mrs. Morgan Roy's share of any marital assets. As they exited the courtroom, reporters clustered around them. Oliver let Celine handle the questions while he walked steadily toward the exit. Behind him, he heard Margaret's voice, high and strained. Oliver, wait. He didn't turn around. You need to see this. Celine placed a folder on the table between them. Oliver looked up from his coffee. They were sitting in her office, 3 days after the court victory, reviewing next steps. The divorce was finalized. The house was listed for sale. Margaret had disappeared again, presumably to lick her wounds and plan her next move. What am I looking at? He asked, opening the folder. Asset discovery results. As ordered by the court, we did a complete search of Margaret's financial history. Celine tapped the document. Found something interesting. A trust fund established by her maternal grandmother. Margaret is the sole beneficiary. Oliver scanned the paperwork. How much? $180,000. Untouched. He looked up sharply. She never mentioned a trust fund. Because it wasn't established until 3 years ago, after you were already married. Her grandmother died and left it in trust until Margaret turned 35. She's 34. Exactly. It matures next month. She probably planned to access it after your divorce was finalized. Oliver leaned back, processing. So while she was stealing from me, from her parents, she had money waiting for her all along. Money she never disclosed during the divorce proceedings, Celine emphasized, which constitutes fraud upon the court. What does that mean for us? Celine's smile was predatory. It means we file a motion claiming the trust as an undisclosed marital asset. Given Margaret's pattern of deception, we have an excellent case. Can she fight it? She could try, but she's lost all credibility with the court. Celine gathered the papers. I've already filed the motion. Hearing's set for next week. And if we win, under normal circumstances, you'd get half. But given her misconduct, Celine shrugged. We're asking for the entire amount. A week later, they were back in the judge's chambers. Margaret appeared with a new attorney, a silver-haired man who specialized in trust law. Her expression was thunderous as the judge reviewed the motion. Your Honor, Margaret's attorney began, the trust in question is not a marital asset. It was established by Mrs. Royce's grandmother specifically for her benefit. Mr. Royce has no claim to it. Under normal circumstances, I might agree, the judge replied. However, Mrs. Royce failed to disclose this substantial asset during divorce proceedings, despite direct questioning about her finances while under oath. She fixed Margaret with a stern look. This court does not look kindly on attempts to hide assets. My client made a simple oversight. Your client has a documented pattern of financial deception. The judge cut him off. This was no oversight. Oliver sat silently as the legal arguments continued. Margaret kept glancing his way, her expression cycling between fury and calculation. She still didn't understand that she'd lost her leverage the moment the truth came out. Finally, the judge called for silence. Given the extensive financial misconduct already established in this case, and Mrs. Royce's failure to disclose this significant asset, I'm granting Mr. Royce's motion. The entire trust shall be transferred to him as compensation for the fraudulent actions taken against him. Margaret gasped. You can't do that. I just did. The judge gathered her papers. Mrs. Royce, consider yourself fortunate that your ex-husband hasn't pursued criminal charges. Yet, outside the courthouse, reporters again swarmed them. Oliver heard snippets of questions as Celine guided him through the crowd. Mr. Royce, how does it feel to turn the tables on your ex-wife? Did you plan this counterattack all along? What will you do with the trust fund money? As they reached Celine's car, one reporter thrust a microphone closer. Mr. Royce, people are calling you a folk hero for beating the system at its own game. Your response? Oliver paused, looking directly into the camera. Justice isn't a game. I simply wanted the truth acknowledged and what was taken returned. And the trust fund? That's more than was taken from you. Sometimes the price of betrayal is higher than expected. Later that evening, Calvin raised a beer and toast. To Oliver Royce, the man who wouldn't stay down. They were sitting in Calvin's garage, the familiar smell of motor oil and metal of comfort after weeks of sterile courtrooms and legal offices. I still can't believe it, Calvin continued. 180 grand, just sitting there waiting for you. Not just me, Oliver replied. I've been thinking about what to do with it. Please tell me you're not giving it back to her. Oliver snorted. No, but I'm not keeping all of it either. Then what? Oliver took a long pull from his beer. How much would it cost to expand this place? Turn into a real garage, not just a side business. Calvin stared at him. You serious? Dead serious. We talked about it for years before I got married. A place of our own. That's a lot of money, man. It's an investment. In something real. Oliver set his bottle down. We split it. 50-50 partnership. What about the rest? You said you're not keeping all of it. Oliver's expression hardened slightly. Some goes to Delia. Not much, just enough to make sure she doesn't end up homeless after Harlan finishes imploding their lives. Calvin raised an eyebrow. Feeling generous toward the in-laws suddenly? Not generous. Strategic. Oliver leaned forward. Delia turned on her daughters when it mattered. That took courage. And the balance. A scholarship fund. For trade school kids who can't afford training. Kids like we were. Calvin was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. I like it. The whole plan. Good. Because I've already talked to a real estate agent about the property next door. Oliver pulled out his phone, showing Calvin the listing. It's perfect for expansion. As they discussed logistics, Oliver felt something shift inside him, a weight lifting. Margaret had tried to erase him, to reduce him to nothing. Instead, she freed him to build something new, something better. And he'd make damn sure she knew it. The community newsletter headline was small but significant. Local businessman faces fraud charges. Below it, a grainy photo of Harlan Morgan leaving the courthouse, face partially obscured by his hand. Oliver read the article as he waited in Calvin's newly expanded office. They'd spent the past 2 months renovating, turning the modest space into a proper auto repair shop with room for 6 vehicles, modern equipment, and 3 additional mechanics. According to the article, Harlan had been charged with attempted fraud for trying to sell counterfeit antiques to a collector. His membership at the Dallas Country Club had been revoked. Former business associates were distancing themselves. The Morgan family's fall from grace was complete. Morning. Calvin entered, carrying 2 coffee cups. Saw you reading about Harlan. Oliver accepted the coffee. Seems he's finally facing consequences. About time. Calvin sat at his desk. You hear Margaret finally found a job? No. Where? Retail. Department store in Houston. Calvin smirked. Quite a step down from Dallas socialite. Oliver didn't respond. He'd stopped tracking Margaret's movements weeks ago. The divorce was final. The financial settlements completed. Whatever she did now was her business. Yes, they reviewed the garage's books, showing a promising first month of operation. Calvin's assistant knocked on the door. There's someone here to see Oliver, she said. Says it's important. Who? Calvin asked. Harlan Morgan. Oliver and Calvin exchanged looks. Send him back, Oliver decided. Harlan entered the office with none of his former swagger. His expensive suit looked rumpled, his face haggard. He'd aged years and months. Oliver. He nodded stiffly. Didn't expect you'd see me. What do you want, Harlan? The older man glanced at Calvin, then back to Oliver. Could we speak privately? Anything you have to say, you can say in front of my business partner. Harlan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fine. I'll get to the point. I need help. With what? My legal troubles. My reputation. Harlan straightened his shoulders, attempting dignity. I've been advised that if you were to make a statement clarify that the issues with Margaret and Tessa were separate from my business dealings, it might help my case. Oliver studied him. And why would I do that? Because regardless of what happened, we're still family. We're not family, Harlan. We never were. Look, Harlan's voice took on an edge of desperation. I'm offering a partnership. A way to rebuild both our reputations. You've got this. He gestured dismissively at the garage. But with my connections, we could do something bigger. I've still got friends in this town. Do you? Oliver asked mildly. Harlan faltered. Enough. Enough to matter. What exactly are you proposing? A business arrangement. Real estate development. I got a line on some properties in a gentrifying area. With your money and my name. Your name is worth nothing now. Oliver interrupted. And my money is invested exactly where I want it. Don't be short-sighted. Harlan snapped, his desperation showing. This place is fine for someone with your background, but you could be more. We could help each other. Oliver stood slowly. You broke bread with snakes. Now lie with them. Harlan blinked. What? You chose your daughters over basic decency. You helped them steal from me, then acted surprised when they stole from you too. I didn't know what they were planning. You knew enough? Oliver cut him off. And now you want me to save you? Again, I'm offering you an opportunity. No. Oliver moved to the door, opening it. You're begging. There's a difference. Harlan's face contorted. You think you've won? That you're better than me? You're still just a nobody who got lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it. Oliver held the door wider. Goodbye, Harlan. After Harlan stormed out, Calvin whistled low. That felt good to watch. It felt better to say. Oliver returned to his desk. Let's get back to work. You think he'll try again? No. Oliver shook his head. He's done. He just doesn't know it yet. That evening, as Oliver locked up the garage, he noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Delia Morgan sat behind the wheel, watching that he crossed to her window. She rolled it down, looking up at him warily. "Mrs. Morgan, Oliver." She seemed uncertain. "I heard Harlan came to see you today." "He did. And nothing. He wanted help I won't provide." Delia nodded slowly. "I thought as much. He's desperate." "That's not my problem." "No, it's mine." She sighed. "We're selling a house. Moving to a condo in Fort Worth. Harlan's sister has offered to help us until things settle." Oliver absorbed this silently. "I wanted to thank you," Delia continued, "for the money you sent. It wasn't much, but it helped when we needed it most. Consider it payment for your testimony. Nothing more." "Even so," she looked at him directly. "I'm sorry, Oliver. For all of it. For not seeing what Margaret was. What she was doing to you." Oliver studied her face, searching for manipulation and finding only exhaustion. "Take care of yourself, Mrs. Morgan. Harlan won't." As Delia drove away, Oliver felt the last thread connecting him to the Morgans finally snap. They had entered his life like a storm, damaging everything they touched. Now they were gone, leaving him to rebuild in their wake. He turned back to the garage, his garage. The sign above the door read Knox and Royce Automotive. Simple, honest, real. For the first time in years, he felt truly at home. 6 months after the divorce, Oliver watched as the last student of the day completed his certification test. The young man, barely 19, carefully dismantled and rebuilt an engine while explaining each component's purpose. His hands moved with growing confidence, the result of months of training. "Time," Oliver called, checking his stopwatch. "That's a pass, Jason. Well done." The kid's face broke into a grin. "For real. For real. You'll get your certification in the mail next week." Oliver extended his hand. "Congratulations." As Jason gathered his tools, practically bouncing with excitement, Calvin entered the training room. "Another one done?" he asked. Oliver nodded. "Third certification this month. The scholarship program's working better than expected." They'd converted part of their expanded garage into a training center, offering classes and certification prep for students who couldn't afford traditional trade schools. The Royce Trade Scholarship covered all expenses, books, and tools for selected candidates. The first class had just 6 students. The current one had 20, with a waiting list for the next session. "Mr. Royce." Jason approached tentatively. "I just wanted to say thanks. For everything." "You earned it," Oliver replied. "Your work speaks for itself. Still, not many people would have given someone like me a shot. Someone like you." Jason shrugged, embarrassed. "You know, kid from the East Side. No money. Not much schooling. I know exactly who you are," Oliver said. "You're me, 20 years ago." After Jason left, Calvin and Oliver walked through the main garage. There, 3 mechanics were finishing up for the day, the space humming with organized activity. "Business update," Calvin announced. "We're booked solid for the next 3 weeks. Had to turn away 2 fleet maintenance contracts because we don't have the manpower. So we hire more mechanics. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe pull from our own graduates. Jason's good enough." Oliver nodded. "Make him an offer. And let's look at expanding again. The property next door is still available." Calvin grinned. "Look at you, building an empire out of spite." "Not spite," Oliver corrected. "Purpose." Later that evening, as Oliver worked late on a custom restoration project, Calvin's voice called from the front. "Visitor for you." Oliver wiped his hands on a shop rag and emerged from the bay to find Celine standing in the reception area, looking crisp and professional in a tailored suit. "Surprise inspection?" he asked, one eyebrow raised. "Just in the neighborhood." She glanced around approvingly. "Place looks good. You've done well. Thanks to your legal work." Celine waved this off. "I just helped you get what was rightfully yours. You built this." She handed him a folder. "Speaking of which, these might interest you." Oliver opened it to find newspaper clippings and printouts. Headlines about the Morgan family's continued downfall. Harlan facing trial for fraud. Tessa divorced and working as a server in Austin. And Margaret applying for bankruptcy protection in Houston. "Why would I care about this?" he asked, closing the folder. "Closure?" Celine suggested. "Validation. I don't need either." He handed the folder back. Their lives aren't my concern anymore. Celine studied him. You really have moved on. I have. Good. She smiled slightly. That's why I stopped by. To make sure. As they walked through the garage, Oliver showing her the training center and expansion plans, Celine asked, do you ever think about what might have happened if they hadn't tried to con you? Sometimes, he admitted, I'd still be working a job I tolerated, married to someone who saw me as a means to an end, surrounded by people who never respected me. So in a way, they did you a favor. Oliver considered this. They freed me by trying to destroy me. There's irony in that. As Celine prepared to leave, she hesitated. One more thing you should know. Margaret's been asking around about you. About the garage. Oliver stilled. Why? No idea. But I thought you should be aware. After Celine left, Oliver returned to his restoration project, but his mind kept circling back to her warning. Margaret had no power over him now, legally or emotionally. But her interest was concerning nonetheless. 2 days later, as Oliver closed up for the night, he spotted a familiar figure across the street. Margaret stood watching, her appearance markedly different from the polished socialite he'd married. Her clothes were simple, her hair pulled back without styling. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the distance. Oliver felt nothing, no anger, no satisfaction, not even pity. Just a profound emptiness where she was concerned. He turned the volume up on the shop's speaker system, letting the music fill the space as he returned to his work. Through the window, he saw Margaret step forward, hesitate, then turn and walk away. You're not even a footnote, he muttered, focusing on the engine before him. The words felt right, a final acknowledgement that she no longer mattered in his story. His life had become something new, something authentic, something he'd built himself, with people who valued more than appearances. As Oliver worked into the evening, surrounded by the honest results of his labor, he realized he'd finally found what the Morgans had always lacked, something real to build his life around. And for that, paradoxically, he had them to thank.